today's video, we're going to be exploring a certain type of voodoo in the audio world, and that's saturation. So as we know it, saturation is a type of effect that can be used to achieve different kinds of things when mixing or mastering. One of those things is breathing life into the track or into the drums or your mix by adding extra harmonics, and this extra harmonics goes along to increase the perceived loudness of the track or mix or whatever master that you've added saturation to. Another benefit of using saturation is that it helps tame dynamics, or it helps, tame the peaks in your tracks or in your mixes, so that you can be able to push it a little further into the limiter or into the clipper or whatever you wish to do after that. And that is what we're going to be exploring specifically in today's video, right? So let's jump right into the DAW and let's witness this voodoo firsthand. Let's go. Okay, so in the DAW, what you can see is that I've pulled up some loops, I've pulled up also some drums and some other elements, but we're going to be muting those for now because I just want us to see what saturation does, especially to the drums. Drums are like the loudest things in your mix or in your masters almost every time, and they have like the highest peaks. So we are going to see how saturation helps us tame these peaks. So what we have here is I've pulled up a couple of different saturation plugins. I have one from Waves, the BB Tubes. I have Black Box. I have Decapitator. I have here this Harmonix plugin from Softtube. And lastly, I have the X Saturator from SSL Native Bundle. So let's get right into it. So why have I pulled up different saturation plugins, you might ask? Well, one is because some of you might have, either one or the other. You might not have all of these saturation plugins, and some of you might have all of them, or you might just want to run your sound through the different saturation plugins. Of course, every plugin is going to sound different, but we are not looking at the sound primarily. We're not going to really look at the sound. What we are looking at is how they help you tame the peaks in your mixes. Usually when engineers hear peak reduction, what immediately comes to mind is compression. And yes, compression is a great tool for peak reduction, but if not used very correctly, you find out that your mixes can end up being, lifeless, being very squashed, and you won't get that punch or that extra loudness that you want from the mix. And that is where saturation comes in. So saturation helps do a lot of the heavy lifting so that the compressor can be able to react, more consistently or more evenly when you apply them. And then you can now use your compressor for something else, like, groove and, some other thing, glue, groove, whatever, and not necessarily peak reduction, right? So enough talking. Let's just put this thing to test and see what we got going. Okay, so the first one is the Magma BB Tubes from Waves. But first, let's hear the material that we're going to be working with. And I've also pulled up this Fruity dB meter so that we can see the peak level before and after saturation. Yeah, so that's about it. And then you can see where we are currently peaking at. Right, you can see where we're currently picking at. What I did before starting this video is I went into all of these plugins and tweaked it a little bit to try to get the sound that I was going for, or to get the results that I was aiming to achieve. And so I'm just going to run you through what I've already done. I'm going to pull it up, and then I'll just explain what I've done basically. So the B preset is on the full reset. So when you open up the Magma BB Tubes, this is how it comes in, but I've already messed with it. So this is what I came up with, right? First is the bass relief. I've pulled it all the way up. This is like the high pass, sidechain high pass that you get on most compressors, most VCA compressors. And that's so that whatever you're doing is not really affecting or is not being triggered by the kick or the bass or whatever is like the loudest in the track that you're working on. So let me put it on now. what I want you to really be focusing on is the levels here on this dB meter, when it's on and when it's off. And also try to listen for, and I've tried to gain match, to level match the plugin when it's off and when it's on, so that the level stays relatively the same, but then we'll see that the peak level is reduced when the plugin is activated. So you can see how much headroom that this is helping us to achieve, right? So like I said, what I've done is I've pushed up this bass relief. If I take it back down, you see how the saturation affects the bass, or the kick in this case. You can see how very distorted the kick becomes. So you might not want to push it all the way up to this point. You might just want to, have it somewhere around the middle. It's all up to you. Just mess around with the plugin and see what you like. And so the next thing I've done is push up this beauty up to here and this beast up to here. So from what I've gathered about this plugin, beauty is adding like the even ordered harmonics. So the distortion is not as pronounced, it's not as prominent, unlike this beast right here, which is the odd ordered harmonics. Oh boy, that's a mouthful. Odd ordered harmonics, or like the odd ordered harmonics. Okay, so I'm adding a ton of this and then just about a little of this. So there you go. You can mess around with all these knobs if you want to change the sound or affect the sound in a different way. But the primary reason for this is gain reduction, peak reduction, and we can see how much peak reduction we are getting, and that is going to help us, be able to push this sound higher and higher into our limiter or into our maximizer to get the desired loudness that we're going for, that we're aiming for. All right, so next up is Black Box, and I've also done the same thing. So when you load up Black Box, this is how it comes, everything straight up the middle, but I've messed around with it a little bit, so you can see what I've done here. I've engaged the saturation and pushed it up, this much. I've left the saturation frequency on flat so that it affects the entire mix evenly. And then I've pushed up the pentode and the triode. So similarly, like the Magma BB tubes, this pentode is the even order harmonics, while the triode is the odd order harmonics. And then I've also level matched by pulling down the output a little bit. So let's hear and see as well what this plugin is doing first without. From what I can hear, I think that we can even still pull down this output level a little bit to really level match, and that will give you, it will still take down. We already have some gain reduction, but you can still, go lower a little bit. That might be too much. So you can see it's crazy how saturation just helps you level out the dynamics in your song's performance or in your mix, and helps you if you don't really know how to properly set a compressor. Let's say, for example, you don't know how to tweak the settings in the compressor, but you want to get that gain reduction, and you don't know what parameters would really give you the sound that you're going for or the results that you want. You can just throw in a saturation plugin and it will help you do that, but you have to do it subtly, right? You have to make sure that you are listening and it's not really changing the sound so much, but then it's getting you the results that you want. That's it for Black Box. And the next one is Decapitator. All right, so let's hear what Decapitator sounds like. I haven't messed with any of this, so let's just see what we can achieve with Decap. So we can see just by putting the plugin and activating the plugin, there's already some gain reduction. I haven't done anything. I haven't pushed up the drive. No changes in any of these knobs. Everything is set to default, but there's already some peak reduction. So some of these plugins, the moment you throw them on, they're already, doing some sort of work in the back end behind the scenes, and you don't necessarily have to do so much, right? I've seen situations where some pro engineers say they just throw on a compressor, not necessarily to compress, but to get the saturation from that unit. And this plugin right here, Decap, is one of those units where you just, put it on there and you don't necessarily have to tweak any knob, and you're already getting the results that you want. So let's turn it off now and then see where the peak was and where it is now. But one thing I did notice when I was trying this Decapitator before I started this video was that cycling through all of these different styles, they have different effects on the sound, the volume, that's the level, and also how much peak reduction that they are bringing to the sound. So let's cycle through these different styles together and then we'll see what we can get from it. So plugins like Decapitator is one of those plugins where you really have to be careful and really know what you are doing, know what you are hearing before using them or while using them, right? You can see how all of these different styles, just from cycling through the different styles, we're getting different sounds, different volume, and we have not even tweaked the drive. We've not, done any of this. We've not changed the tone. We've not reduced the output or changed the mix level. And we're already getting different sounds. Some are a bit more subtle. The others are a bit more aggressive, right? So with this, you really want to be careful. You really want to know what you're doing. You can crank up the effect, hear what is going on, and then, start to slowly back it off and hear what it's adding or what it's taking away or what it's doing to your sound or to your source material. And if that's the vibe you're going for, that's very okay. But just so you know that with plugins like this, you just want to be very, very careful using them. All right, and the next is this guy right here. I don't know why this particular one takes so much time to come up. Okay, so we have this guy from Softtube, the harmonics analog saturation. And I really like the design of this. It gives you that very vintage feel. It feels like, you're actually tweaking some kind of hardware. But I also noticed the same thing, just like with Decapitator. I also noticed the same thing with this guy too. You can see the different types here. So cycling through these different types was also affecting the sound in, subtle ways, more aggressive ways, and all of that. And as you can hear, gain reduction is already taking place, or as you can see, rather, gain reduction is already taking place. Again, you don't always have to, do so much, right? You don't always have to do so much. So again, like we did with Decapitator, we're going to do here as well. We're going to cycle through all of these different presets and try to see how they all affect the sound and to what degree they reduce the peak level. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do now is push up this drive knob, see how much saturation we can get, and then cycle through all of these again and see if we're getting, more gain reduction or it's just the sound that's going to change. So there you have it. We've cycled through all of the different styles or types, and also, messed around with the drive to see what they do. And as you can tell, the different styles affect the material differently, as you can obviously see. So it's all up to you. Cycle through these different presets depending on what you're working with, depending on what you want to achieve, and then go for what feels right for you and what feels right for the song that you're working on. But like I said, our major focus is on how much gain reduction we are getting, something that helps us to tame peak level without necessarily pulling up a compressor. And we can see some of these saturation plugins do it perfectly, and they're not even altering the sound of the source material. Some of them are even giving more life, breathing more life into the source material and taking down the peak level. I mean, that's like getting the best of both worlds. Okay, so the last but definitely not the least, I'm sure there are other saturation plugins out there. Depending on what you have, just mess around with it. I'm not really pushing all the different knobs in all of the saturation plugins. Some plugins I didn't even push any knobs at all, and I was already getting some very noticeable results. So you can still go further and do, mess around with these things. If you don't mess around, you'll never find out. So the more you mess around, the more you find out, right? So yeah, let's go. And this time around with the X saturator from SSL Native Bundle. So again, gain reduction happening, but the way this one works is you push up the drive and then you pull back on the output level. When you push up the drive, it saturates and then it evens out the peaks, and then you now take it back down to level match with the input. Make sure that the input and the output is on the same level. You want to follow your ears and make sure that when you bypass this plugin, the level and the feel of the drums is the same when it's activated. And you'll find out that on the output, there is a lower peak level than on the input. So yeah, I mean, this is really a great tool. Saturation is a great tool in mixing, and there is a lot that you can do with it. This is just one of the many ways you can use saturation. Yeah, that's it for this video. Thank you very much for coming with me on this one. And if you got a ton of value, if you liked this video, if you learned something, please leave me a like, drop a comment down in the comment section to say well done, and also subscribe to this channel so that you don't miss any of my future videos. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the very next one. Have a good one.